Welcome to Behind the Play, a video and podcast product of The Hoop Show that shines a light on the careers and lives of players past and present, as well as the fans that are keeping us Geelong strong. My name is Paul James, and today I'm joined by a Yank on the Footy's own Craig Wessels. How are you, mate?
I'm great, Paul. I'm great. Thanks for having me on this morning. Appreciate it.
No, not a problem at all. And yeah, I guess like you've hit the nail on the head there this morning. Now, if the Yank on the Footy title wasn't enough to suggest it already, there's a fairly substantial time difference between the two of us right now. For you, it is about 7:45 in the morning as we speak. For me, it's approaching 10 p.m. And yeah, I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects. I mean, there's plenty of really. I've got a little bit of detail on your life and your interest in footy up to this point, but certainly one of the most interesting aspects is how you discovered the game, being half a world away and all those sorts of things. I'm certainly keen to pick through those with you shortly.
No, that's great. I kind of came to the game organically back in 2016. I'm a school teacher, and I also work as an announcer. Yeah, I work as an announcer, announcing the gridiron football games for my school as well as soccer. So when I would go home from games on Friday nights, I would sit down and flip on the television when I got home, and I would find this would have been in like August, September, so it would have been right towards the end of the 2016 season.
Yep.
And there were a couple games of AFL that were on, and I became intrigued by it and just started getting into watching it. Now, I saw about 6 or 7 games during that season. They didn't have the grand final on television here, so I didn't see the Bulldogs win that year. But I got more and more intrigued, and then as 2017 rolled around, I became more and more interested in it. It was reading about it during our winter time because I'm not a hockey fan. I'm really not a basketball fan.
Yeah.
So
off season for your core sports.
It is. Yeah, exactly. So it was an opportunity for me. I'm a huge baseball fan, and footy runs right over baseball season.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's and in my case, it really has run over baseball season, which I've not watched a baseball game in over 2 years now.
I mean, I guess on that briefly, like I hear, and I am not an expert when it comes to the baseball scene whatsoever, but I do hear that there's a little bit of consternation between the fans of the game at the moment. It does seem like there's some decisions that have been made at, I guess, perhaps at the highest levels that aren't resonating all that well with the fans. Would that be about right? Is that part of why you've drifted away? Or is it just been that footy has consumed everything?
I think it's a combination. One, footy has consumed a lot, but I've become rather disenchanted by some of the decisions that have been made in baseball. Similar to longtime footy fans who are shaking their head about
some
these
of the
50-meter penalties, or the 100-meter penalty that we saw with the Bulldogs the other night.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that little video clip that I saw and I don't remember who it was from the Bulldogs, where he could just reach out and he tapped the other player with the ball. It was Kennedy, I think, wasn't it, that he was chasing after?
Yeah, Alex Keith and Josh Kennedy, yeah.
Yeah, where he tapped him with the ball, like, look, he's still in front of me. And I'm sorry, that in the spirit of the game, I think that's ridiculous. But baseball has done some things similar to that, where they've, one, baseball doesn't have a salary cap.
Yeah.
So now they do have a limit where if you go over that, you have to pay what they call a quote unquote luxury tax, with that money being distributed to other clubs. But those team owners will quite often just put that money in their pocket, which is not necessarily a great thing. Back in 2018, we had a huge scandal with the team that ultimately won the championship, the Houston Astros, that were caught cheating.
Yeah, right.
Definitely changed the outcome of games, and I've been a baseball fan for more than half a century, and I think that those players should have been banished from the game permanently.
What sort of cheating was involved? Was like
they had somebody out in the outfield with a very powerful camera and a radio system who was basically relaying the catcher's hand signals. So the catcher will, as they're crouched down, will provide a series of hand signals basically saying what pitch it is. And then they were sending that message to somebody that was in the dugout kind of over by the interchange, but further back in the tunnel, that was getting that. And they had like a large plastic trash can and a bat or a hammer or something that they were banging on a certain number of times to indicate whether it was going to be a fastball or an off-speed pitch it was coming. So these guys were looking like all stars and just were mashing the baseball. But the thing that they've done most recently, they're trying to speed the game up. Baseball does not have a clock per se. Baseball is, it's kind of it's in many ways it's like cricket because there isn't a timetable for cricket. You do have the Big Bash where there's kind of
you do have sort of Big Bash and the one days that are condensed matches.
Right,
but
right. But baseball games, some of them might last 2 hours, some of them might last 3.5 hours, depending upon the pace of play. But people's attention spans are not what they used to be. You're a teacher. I'm a teacher. We know that we see that, unfortunately, because of these little devices right here.
Beautiful little phones,
But so they're trying to speed up the pace of the game, and they're doing something next year, which and I use this cricket analogy with somebody recently that if you have a batter, and I think I'm using the right term in cricket, who does not have the ability to hit the ball, in baseball, we would say that they're pulling the ball if they're hitting it on the same side of where they're standing. Okay, that they're kind of pulling it their direction. But we would say that they're only capable of pulling the ball, but not hitting the ball to the opposite side of the cricket ground. So defensively, if I know they can only pull the ball, I might deploy more defenders where he's going to pull the ball. Field. Exactly. So I have a better option of catching the ball and getting him out. Well, baseball has now said that starting next year, that the defensive layout of the club is not allowed to do that, which means that it's rewarding hitters who are not adept at doing their job well.
Yeah, they're only like a one-sided player.
Exactly. So they're rewarding players that are not able to hit the ball in the other direction.
I understand that. I'm not about that.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, without knowing the game nearly well enough for the sake of this conversation, that doesn't sit right with me. Yeah, I think obviously there's going to be players that will be stronger on one side than the other. That's natural.
Right.
But to kind of change the rules or bend the rules to suit someone, I don't. No, I don't like that. And so is this something that's already been locked in to begin next year, or is this something that's still kind of in discussion?
No, it's locked in to start next year. So they're kind of allowing teams to figure out how are we going to phase this out. But as far as I know, again, I haven't watched this year, but I know it becomes official next year. So
it's a grace period.
It's frustrating, and it's just baseball is a beautiful game. I love. I mean, I coached the game for many years, but I've just if they're losing fans like me, I think the game is unfortunately doomed. And people who are footy fans who see the stand rule, who see these 50-meter penalties, who see the umpire abuse penalties being implemented, there are people who've been footy supporters for 20, 30, 40 years who are probably just as frustrated as I am about baseball. And I see this in some social media postings where people are like, "This game is unwatchable now," which is really sad to me. I mean, I still love. Yeah, it is because you're looking at trying to grow the game into a 19th club and prospectively a 20th club. Yeah, exactly, and it's I completely understand the health and safety aspect of trying to protect from concussions and that sort of thing. But, I've joked that it's almost like the umpires have become so thin-skinned that when they suffer any sort of injury, they go to hospital to get an MRI and they just hold them up to the light and go, no, it's only a sprain, because they can see right through them because they're so thin-skinned now.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Yeah. But I don't think it's. And again, let me ask you: Is it them that's making that decision? Yeah, I mean, they're being directed what to do by the likes of Brad Scott.
Yes.
At this point in time, so does most of this fall on the shoulders of Brad Scott? And how do we get our coach to give his brother a call and say, seriously, man, knock it the hell off?
Yeah, surely if there was any way that we can get some of this fixed, it's through Chris Scott, right? So, in terms of things like the head-high contact and the protecting the head for concussions and those sort of things, I'm mostly okay with what they've done over the years. And that if a player chose to duck their head and receive contact as a result, well, they forfeit the right there. Now, obviously, you want the best for them health-wise, but they made the choice to duck their head and have potentially taken on contact themselves.
And we have somebody
these other decisions like dissent.
Yeah. I just it's frustrating. Because it's not. It's simply asking a question.
If they're not being obnoxious or rude or abusive.
Game. I have seen old footage of confrontations going on between
Wacko
players between players and umpires. But in the years that I've been watching the game, I've not seen that sort of thing.
No,
I've not noticed it.
Like, I'm a big fan of the NBA, and because all the conversations kind of going on at the moment around the dissent in our game, it's very sterile in that space at the moment, or controversial because someone's dared to raise their hands but not utter a word. And then I take a look at the NBA, and there's stoppages all the time for timeouts and those sort of things, but if there's a controversial thing, you've got people running onto the court, from the bench, or the coach, or the players that are already on the court, waving their arms about and kind of shouting in the referees' faces, and it just... Now, I'm not saying that that's okay. I don't think we really want that in either sport, but we do need to understand that there's a human aspect to this. There's a passion that comes out, and it's instantaneous because you're throwing absolutely all of yourself at this in the moment. And there's psychologists that are saying like it's not possible to be like, when you are playing at that sort of level and in that sort of heightened state, to be able to play at the level that you're playing, to then be able to flick a switch and turn it off instantly so that you don't not even abuse someone or even potentially ask a question, no matter the tone, but to just not even, that moment where you might put your hands up only to be, and you try and hide it by reaching and putting your hands through your hair or whatever. Like, there's no wiggle room, and it's crazy.
I said something a couple weeks ago after this really started to getting implemented. I said that maybe we should just go ahead and scrap the game completely, and just get that robot fighting stuff that was going on in that movie Real Steel, and get Hugh Jackman to run the league, and so we have robots that don't have personalities, that don't have emotions and that sort of thing. Have them just go beat the snot out of one another. And let's just leave it at that. Let's just get rid of footy. Let's get rid of the NRL, the NBA. Let's just get rid of all the sports, and let's just watch robots fight with one another. Let's just go ahead and do it now. Then rip the Band-Aid off.
They are trying to do it. Yeah, it's weird like that. And I do hope that. We've heard the phrase "common sense" get uttered this weekend, but I hope that common sense prevails at some point, and that we realise that there is still this human aspect to it, and that we can dial some of these things back, and maybe if they're really committed to it, then change the penalty.
Yeah,
Bring back the old 15-metre penalty or whatever it happens to be. So, like, where you're not blowing the game up. And again, things like the Josh Kennedy 100-metre penalty that we just saw this weekend for such a small thing. Like, he just couldn't get out of the way. And when it comes to the bigger, older and sometimes slower players, if you've got a 50-metre penalty and you see someone like that that's in your road, these players are making a beeline for them because there's an opportunity there. And Josh Kennedy absolutely fits that bill because he's older, his knees are not great.
Right. Well, I would
see what you can get out of it.
I would love to see because you'll see quite often in games where they will, and they'll do this, at the quarter breaks. And I don't think the AFL is ever going to allow this to happen on one of the programs about their game because it would make them look bad. But if you because they have the tracking devices in the jumpers.
Yep.
You could do the layout where you have Josh Kennedy heading up the ground and watching the Keith deviating towards him. Because if he goes in a straight line, that's one thing. But I think if you go back and look at that, and we're able to do an overlay, like an overhead shot, I bet you're going to see him where it's not a straight line, where he's just going to run right up Kennedy's backside there.
Yeah.
And it's going to and yes, he's taking advantage of the way the rule is in place right now. But I think we can both agree, and I think there are probably people that are going to be watching and listening to this are going to agree, it's a pretty dumb rule.
Yeah. I think the issue is the rule itself, as opposed to how it's being exploited potentially. Like, if there's a rule there and there's a potential way that you can exploit it, you do that. And that's happened across all sports for years. And I mean, I even think back to my days of playing junior footy, and one of the first things the coach should talk about is like, if you've won a free kick or you've taken a mark and someone's like, they're trying to hold you up at the time because maybe it was a contest, they maybe got you high or whatever the case is, and that ball's kind of locked in there in the middle, push right up against them, and then just then go run back to go take your kick, but drop the ball in the process as if they've knocked the ball out of your hands. Umpire's going to give you a 50. and it works, and you see it still in the AFL today where they get right in the contest and then it seems to mysteriously bobble out of their hands because they've dropped it. Like they're trying to like there's so much going on. The umpire's not going to notice whether the man on the mark's hands have or haven't actually knocked that thing out. All they see is that the player had possession. Suddenly it's fallen out of their hands. Must have been something.
Let me ask you this from somebody who's only ever watched the game on television.
Yeah, we'll have to get you out one day.
Absolutely. Should, and I don't think that I've actually seen this before, but should especially with events that are happening close to the boundary, should the boundary umpires be given more authority to make like on the ground calls rather than simply whether the ball is in or out? Because that's a pretty obvious thing to do, to call the ball in or out. Should they be able to make and have input, and I don't know if they do or not actually, in terms of whether or not a ball had been knocked out, whether there was prior opportunity, whatever the case may be?
No, so they can only officiate for the out of play based decisions. Right. And it'd be a very interesting one if you did give them the power. And again, I think back to the very controversial common sense ending to the Richmond and Sydney game that we've just seen, where that was obviously right on the boundary line. Like maybe the boundary umpire would have been able to call that, and we might have gotten the correct. And maybe, I mean, the AFL's ticking off this one and saying it was correct, but there'd be less doubt in the whole thing. But conversely, we're already seeing complaints about the very high free kick counts that we're getting, and if you've got more officiating personnel out there,
that's true.
Yeah, so there's kind of pros and cons, and like,
I just
a game that is very correct, or do you want that, or do you want it a bit more free flowing as a result, less interruptions, less
Right. Well, I just thought in terms of would they be able to and I don't know if they're hooked up with the radios where they could basically tell the field umpires that you got that wrong, that wasn't what you saw it as, it shouldn't be a free kick or something of that nature.
To be able to offer their input, even if they're not the one making the final decision, I feel like offering their input's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about it, because they're there. They give them the nice bright yellow shirt or the blue shirt, depending upon who's playing, and maybe let them say something once in a while.
Yeah, give them a voice.
Yeah,
let's empower these people more than they already have been.
I mean, because they're already getting close to getting a 50-meter penalty called on themselves because they're throwing their arms up from time to time too.
It's a very good point.
Yeah,
we'll have to really start reassessing this. Brad Scott, you got some work to do. Chris, getting his ear. All right, so we've managed to talk for nearly 15, 20 minutes on all things the game itself, and we haven't really focused on the core of the show, which is you. So you obviously mentioned about 2016 was when you discovered the game and you kind of just stumbled upon it. Now, through that time, and you've obviously aligned yourself with Geelong, though you do make it your business to try and keep across what's going on with all the clubs as best as possible, and I think your show has been fantastic for that.
Well, thank you.
But I guess, and I say this as a Geelong supporter, so anyone listening, I don't mean this in a horrible anti-Geelong sort of way, I swear. Why Geelong? Because in that time, now obviously we've been there and abouts the whole time, but in that time, the Bulldogs have won, Richmond have won 3, we've lost a grand final in that time, there's been West Coast, there's been Melbourne, but obviously more immediately around when even Hawthorn had just come off the back of 3 premierships by the time you joined. What was it about Geelong that caught the eye?
Well, when I was deciding on which club to support, I actually, I was coming into this blind, so I actually spent that 2016 winter time for me going into the 2017 season. I started creating spreadsheets and how have clubs done? Seriously, how is their? I figured out how the percentage thing worked. I mean, I actually sat down with a calculator, figuring out, okay, this is how it works. Because I didn't have anybody that
a baseline, yeah.
No, I didn't have anybody that I could bounce ideas off, because the podcast was still something that was,
well down the road,
almost 3 years down the road before I was going to even think about doing that. And I'd narrowed it down to 3 different clubs. One of them was Brisbane. One of them was Collingwood. Okay. There's the school where I teach. Our school colors are black and white.
Okay.
There was that,
I can see that
connection there. I eliminated them first out of the 3 that I had chosen because I got thinking
once
about
you read
it.
about the supporters.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Not quite. I've met some very nice
Collingwood
supporters online, and I will say that, and if the one thing that I have appreciated is that while supporters of other clubs do give you a little bit of a hard time, they are, for the most part, they're, at least in my case, they've been very gracious. If I have questions, they don't. I've only had a couple people who have been very curt with me, but for the most part, they've been pretty pleasant, understanding, not afraid to answer questions that I may have. But when I got it down to Brisbane and I got it down to Geelong, I was thinking I would kind of like to support I'm a Cleveland sports fan, so
yep.
Cleveland is one of the small cities in Major League, in professional sports here with the. So, and I thought, you know what, I want to get outside of maybe the hub where the bulk of the clubs of the competition are, in Melbourne, and so I guess I could have figured in, maybe an Adelaide club or a Sydney club, but I thought, maybe Brisbane, maybe Geelong. But then the thing that really put me over the line with them is that between my grandfather, my uncle, my father, my cousin, and my brother-in-law, there was almost 175 years of working for Ford.
Oh, right. Okay. So the sponsorship.
That had a lot to do with it also. And I have 2 Ford vehicles sitting in front of my house. Well, one, my wife is out of town right now, but I have 2 Ford vehicles sitting in front of my house, and I've only owned 1 car that was not a Ford in my life.
Yeah, right. No,
and
I wrecked
that one.
And I suppose once you'd made the did the playing list, is there anyone that, because you've obviously seen a little bit of the game at that point, did the playing list kind of appeal as well?
And again, this is before I knew which players were considered the superstars. The player that really ultimately, and I should have mentioned this before, the player that pushed me over the edge to become a Cat supporter was one that if I gave people the 2017 list and I said, okay, here's the list of Geelong supporters, or the Geelong list, which player pushed me over the edge to become a Cat supporter, I would be stunned if people got it.
I don't know the answer to this, so can I'll throw a name.
Go ahead, take a guess.
2017 list. Jed Buse?
Nope. They're no longer with the club.
Oh, no longer with the club. Jared Rivers would have been at the club at that time.
That's not a name I'm familiar with. Sorry.
Or would it have been Jared Rivers at that point? Maybe. Yeah.
They are still playing in the comp now.
Oh.
For
some reason, that's not helping me though. I'm having a brain fade. You leave the club and I scratch you at that point. Oh. So I'm wheeling through all the clubs in my head. I'm thinking Charlie Constable, but he wouldn't have been drafted at that point. Someone at Sydney.
We've mentioned the club.
Link McCarthy
already. Right club, wrong player.
Oh, okay. So then that leaves us with only one other option. Okay, that's a fantastic choice then.
Yeah. Nakia Cockatoo is the one that pushed me over the edge, because watching when he was healthy back in 2017.
He's electric.
He was like a bull in a china shop. It was just watching him in the midfield. He reminded me of an NFL linebacker.
Yeah, right.
Playing the game, and if I was coming into the game now. If I was just coming into the game now and thinking I'm going to be a Cats, which club do I want to support? Right now, the player that I love watching play in the hoops is Brad Close.
Yep.
Hands down, Brad Close is the guy that I'm watching and just waiting to see what he's going to do, because he is.
That's Ben very happy with you for starters.
Yeah, a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, he's a very good player to watch. And so obviously, you jumped aboard the Cats there, and you did plenty of research at that point. You've been riding the bumps ever since. What has it been like? You you don't get to see the games in person. You've kind of jumped in, and you're learning this game, and you're learning this list, and you're learning the history, and you're seeing Geelong come so close year in, year out, but not quite getting there, especially 2020.
Yeah.
What's that like for you? Do you start to go, oh, where'd Nakia Cockatoo go? Oh, Brisbane. Maybe I'll jump ship.
No, I didn't think that at all. I mean, I wish him nothing but the best. I mean, I hope, I
hope it's great for him too.
Yeah. I mean, I hope what I say during during the discussions I've had with people, I said, of course I want to see the Cats win every game, but then I want to watch 8 other great games.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily care who wins or loses the other games. Now, if it's advantageous for the Cats, then sure, I might have a
stake in
cheering interest. I almost said rooting interest, and I know not to do that. A cheering interest in.
You have learned a lot about this country, haven't you?
In terms of who I want to see win. So the Collingwood win last night over Carlton was beneficial to us because it brings us
just
a little
pulls them
closer
back
to
a
the
bit.
4. Yeah, exactly. But it is just as far as watching the ups and downs. Being a Cleveland sports fan, it's the Cavaliers won the championship, and absolutely, because the baseball team, which is now called the Guardians, they used to be the Indians. They changed the team name this year. The last time they won the championship, my mom was 6 years old. She will be 80. She'll be 80 in November.
Right.
Okay. The Browns won the championship when I was a year old. I'll be 59 next month. So I have,
and even the Cavaliers in the basketball took them forever and forever.
Well, that was first and only one. So that's the only championship in that since I was a year old. And as I've joked with people, I said that the first Cleveland championship in my lifetime happened when I was in diapers. I hoped that the second one didn't happen when I was back in diapers.
Shit. That's a brilliant way to put it. And let's hope that's not the case for all of our sakes.
Yes, let's hope.
So you make your choice, and obviously, there's the down. Well, Geelong has been. I hesitate to call it the downs because we've had a fantastic time even through that period, despite the fact that we haven't come away with the ultimate prize.
Right.
You go through that, and I assume at this point, you do your best to kind of investigate the histories of other clubs and those kind of associated with them. But obviously Geelong being the primary focus, how far back do you go at this point, at that particular point in time? Are you just trying to consume everything? Do you try and get yourself in touch with 07, 9 and 11? Or do you, what happens at this point?
Really, since I don't have, other than the people that I talk to on social media, I have not made a lot of connections within the club itself. I did have the three. I mean, I've interviewed past players from a number of different clubs.
Yep.
I interviewed Kate Roffey, the D's president, not long after she got the job, which I was amazed that she. I emailed her just saying here's who I am. I said congratulations. When the dust settles, I would love the chance to learn what a club president does in the AFL. From that, and like 2 or 3 days later, I have an email from her. When do you want to sit down and talk? And I talked to her, and I ended up talking to her for an hour and a half, like a week later.
That's fantastic.
And it's just, it's one of the things that I have fallen in love with about the game as a whole. And I know I gotten away from your Geelong centric question there, because I called it way back at the beginning when I started doing the podcast. To me, it's kind of a love affair that the club has with the fans, because there is a symbiotic relationship between the supporters and the clubs, because the clubs in many ways are buoyed by memberships, by the supporters. And here in the US, athletes here are paid significantly large sums of money. It's huge. But
1 year for some of the most elite players is equal to multiple players' entire careers over here.
Exactly. So there's, and again, Paddy Dangerfield is making a very good salary playing footy.
Absolutely.
Okay. even somebody who's just starting out is making a pretty good sum of money, but it's not necessarily going to be their career. But they're not priced out of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
When I lived about an hour away from Cleveland. If I had happened to go into a corner store after a Cavaliers game, I wasn't going to run into LeBron James at the corner store because his wife had called and said, "Hey, you need to pick up a gallon of milk on the way home because we don't have any."
No, he'll
It
send
wasn't
someone
going
to
to
do that
happen.
for him.
He's priced himself out of that. But I see, and this is one of the things I absolutely love. I see the photos, now that, especially now that COVID is over, it wasn't happening during that, but pre-COVID and post-COVID, seeing the supporters who just happen to be out at a coffee shop or having lunch somewhere, that they run into a player from a club, and they snap a quick photo and such, and the people seem to be much more approachable, and the after the game stuff, the shaking of hands, and it, like I said, it just seems to be a genuine passion between the clubs and the supporters. And COVID has kind of thrown a monkey wrench into that, but it looks like it's starting to come back. And that's one of the things that I love about this game, just seeing that relationship. And because the sports here in the United States, baseball is kind of close to that, but still, the salary structure, those are two different orbits that the fans and the athletes are in. The orbits of the AFL player and the supporter, those orbits sometimes interact with one another. But
I'm with you.
I hopefully that makes sense. But
no, you're right. The nature of the structure here, there's more. I mean, there's a financial investment from the fans in that sense, more so than what we see in other sports. But it does. There is just a. You're right. I guess your LeBron James comparison is not a bad one, because you wouldn't see that here. Even Dusty is probably the most, I'd imagine at the moment, the highest paid player in the competition.
Mm-hmm.
He still goes down and gets his groceries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
I'm sure he hates it, but people see him.
Well, that's true.
He
But
seems very insular, and
there's a gentleman who I've had on to preview Port Adelaide a couple times. He does the Corn the Pear podcast, and he's kind of it didn't happen during COVID, of course, but he lives right near the Port training ground, and it's kind of become tradition that when he heads off to work on Monday mornings, it's the same coffee shop that Ken Hinckley was stopping in.
Yeah, right.
So it kind of become this tradition where he had told me, he said that after Port had won games and they were showing up, he'd found himself buying Hinckley's coffee for him, but then once they'd started losing a game or two, Hinckley was buying his coffee for him.
Oh, right.
So it's kind of become this symbiotic relationship, in terms of who's picking up the tab for the coffee that Monday morning. So again, that's just not something you're going to see here. Which I think it's just a really cool thing, So
that relationship, two-way relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the point where I'm consuming as much as I possibly can about every club. Yes, I'm a Cat supporter, and I've got all the Cats gear behind me here, and I do I got a book called the Rebirth of the Record. I just picked it up here recently that just showed up. I don't remember. Yeah, that I haven't had a chance to read yet. So I'm starting to explore a little bit of the history as far as that goes, but I'm wanting to learn so much about the rest of the comp as well. So I mean, anytime I get a chance to talk to anybody, regardless of which club they've been involved in, and even if it's at the local level, I love seeing how those competitions tick. That's one of the reasons why I do a shout out to a local footy club during each episode. Because that way it kind of links gets me linked a little bit more closely with the game at that lower level, just because some of those kids are going to move on and play it at higher levels going on. It's just kind of fun to see where that's growing from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you, and it's a really fantastic little gesture that you're applying to the show there, and I guess that is the perfect segue over to talking about the show itself. And so at this point you've spent a few years learning about the game, you've chosen a club, you're watching it all sorts of crazy hours thanks to the time zone difference that we've already referenced. What led to the idea to create the podcast in the first place? Because you do come at it with a perspective, through a perspective that not many, when you're launching the podcast, that not many do. I mean,
No,
at the end of the day, there's
there
still
are a
so
couple
many
of us.
people that don't know about this game. And you see
Yeah.
YouTube reactions all the time to the
Right.
is AFL stuff pops up in your feed all the time. And okay, like people are discovering this thing, but
Yeah.
it's
Well,
still quite a minority. And to actually take it further, to invest on the level that you have is very different.
it's very much the minority. There are a handful of us here that are doing it. I decided, that I wanted to try to use the podcast as me kind of, kind of a digital climbing of the bell tower to ring the bell and say, hey, you should be checking out this game, because if you're not a baseball fan, and if you're a fan of the NFL or college football here in the United States, and if maybe you don't follow baseball, this is a great game to fill that downtime after one football season starts here and the next gridiron season ends and the next one begins, because it's right smack dab in the middle of that. So I've wanted to use it to try to bring other Americans to the game, and I've had a little bit of success. Not over 60% of my listeners are in Australia, so trust me, I don't mind that at all.
No, I mean, probably not surprising at the end of the day.
Right. But I've had some success with getting people interested in the game here, and it's we were getting back in 2016 when I first started watching, we were getting 3 or 4 games a week on television here through cable television. During COVID, they were showing pretty much every game because the AFL was the only live game that was being played. Exactly.
Yeah, so, I remember that time, obviously, hearing those sort of little things, and then it was the likes of Pat McAfee, for example. he was probably the most high profile that I recall, kind of making a giant deal about the game for the exact reason that you said. Like, he was just kind of flicking around and there's no sports on, so what is this thing? He discovers it, and all of a sudden, like, he becomes this big personality and big name that's kind of shouting out about this little known sport around the world. And I'd imagine like lots of voices doing that thing at various different scales, big and small, has probably done wonders for the game internationally in the last few years.
But McAfee makes me laugh a little bit, because somehow I ended up getting, and I still to this day have no idea how I got blocked by his Twitter page.
Oh, really?
I have no idea how it happened. In fact, I lost my Facebook page, my regular Facebook page that I'd had for basically however long Facebook had been in existence. I lost that at the beginning of April this year.
Right.
I have no idea why it got shut down. The only thing that I can think is that I used the word punch in a post. I was describing the Cats and Magpies game, where the Cats had gone. They were down by 37 and came back to win the game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I had described it. Yeah, I had described it as the second fight between Rocky and Clubber Lang in Rocky 3, where he allowed Clubber Lang to punch himself out and get tired, which is what the Magpies kind of did in that game. And I get up and I put that post online. I thought, that's a brilliant reference. I get up the next day, whole damn page is gone, and I have no. And it
can't possibly be that.
No, well, I don't know.
Surely not.
I don't put anything else out there that would even warrant. I haven't posted political stuff other than a snarky meme every once in a while on there for years, because it doesn't. I'm too busy with footy to worry about that right now. So I mean, I lost hundreds and hundreds of contacts, thousands of people that I was interacting with. So I'm rebuilding Facebook from scratch on there. So, but yeah, McAfee, he did do, I think, a great job initially, but then once baseball came back, once the NBA came back, I think that the corporate people whispered into his ear, talk about the games in our country.
Yeah.
And he never brought the AFL up again.
I think I heard him pop up when Buddy kicked his 1000th, but it was very brief, and that was about it.
Yeah. I mean, that you can't not get excited about watching the imagery of that goal happening, unless you're a Cat supporter.
The talk that we'll probably never see anything like that again. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
But the likelihood of seeing something like that ever happen again is incredibly low, and certainly as the world continues to evolve the way it is, less and less likely will it be that it can get to a point where people can just storm the field so easily as well. So we'll see what happens.
That's probably true. That's probably true as well.
There's those two components combined. So we'll see what happens. And look, hopefully it does, because it was as much as it was against the Geelong Footy Club, it was still incredible to see.
Yeah, but I mean, when I first, I jumped in, I guess, going back to like it was the third and the fifth episodes I did an interview with, and I did not do a great job of editing that one. So, with gentleman by the name of Chris Hickey, who is, I believe, the nephew of Reg Hickey.
Yep.
So it was, so I guess I did jump into the Geelong pool real quickly there with the podcast there. But I mean, I love talking to people from all different facets of the game. So, I know that I'm supposed to, as a Cat supporter, I know I'm supposed to hate Hawthorn. I know I've been told that, in fact, I have a sticker on the back of my van that says, I support two clubs, Geelong and whoever's playing Hawthorn, but I don't know if I really truly mean that, because, I don't.
You're just doing it because you have to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't have, it's not in my DNA to hate another club in the AFL. I came into it so late.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the NFL, I'm a Browns fan. I respect the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are I think are our closest rival. But the Baltimore Ravens used to be the Cleveland Browns. The owner moved the team back in 1994 to Baltimore. I loathe the Baltimore Ravens. I've joked and said that if my first wife owned an NFL team, and her team was playing the Ravens, I would go sit in the owner's box with her family to cheer against the Ravens.
Fair enough. But I mean, you're right though. Like the core of it is that those rivalries are very real. But in your particular case, because you don't have that history there, I suppose, or weren't there to kind of build that emotional investment or level of hatred in some cases at the genesis of it. Mm-hmm. Means that it doesn't quite strike the same, and I totally understand that. I mean, for me, like I was born in '89, so I was alive just in time. Well, not that I was recognising anything that was going on, but alive just in time for Geelong to lose what is still argued to be the greatest, if not one of the greatest, grand finals of all time against Hawthorn. And for a lot of people, that's where the disgust towards Hawthorn really started. For me, I didn't have that. I knew what had happened once I was old enough to kind of pick back through and learn more about the club, and obviously being witness to a bit more heartbreak with a few grand finals in the years since. But it wasn't until 2008, and I was there on the day, and we shouldn't have lost, but we did. And that's where the seed just kind of got sown a little bit. And didn't matter. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the quote-unquote Kennett curse from that time onwards, I should say, from that time onwards. And no win in the middle there satiated the whole thing. And at the end of the day, that game, the 2008 grand final, like the whole Kennett curse thing that everyone talks about, is sure, it's fantastic, but it's bookended by a grand final loss and a preliminary final loss. They got it. I mean, I guess we beat them in one, I think it was a qualifying final along the way, but when it actually counted, when it was a knockout final, we lost both. So they, I think, as far as I'm concerned, still hold the credits in the bank there, unfortunately.
Can I ask you a very serious question here? Yeah. Has anybody ever told Jeff Kennett about sunblock?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, just curious about that.
No, I don't think anyone's told him to shut up either, but he keeps putting his foot in his mouth. So, that guy, former leader of this state, I might add.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure if you're aware of that little bit of.
No, I did know he was in politics at one time. Yeah. Well, I'm sure as a team president, you're still in politics.
Yeah. I'm certainly paying close attention given the teacher status. But Jeff Kennett needs to just stop. And as enjoyable as it was during that time with the quote unquote curse, at the end of the day, it probably just fueled that frustration and anger towards him even more because of how it started and finished. It was nice in the middle. Certainly not going to complain if we're going to win, but when you look at it, you stand back from it, and it's all over now. It's not fun.
Yeah,
but it does make Easter Monday all the more exciting. Like that's Obviously, COVID's kind of dampened that, and now my kids are of an age. Things are a little bit tricky right now to be able to disappear for a whole day to go to the footy. But certainly the next opportunity we get when Geelong plays Hawthorn, I'll be there on Easter Monday and will not miss it, because that since 2008 that has been a fixture for me. I can't.
Now your older child, you mentioned, I think you said was 3.
Yeah, he's 3.
Okay, has he shown any interest in sitting down to watch footy at all with Dad yet? Is that?
I've indoctrinated him.
Okay.
So when the game comes on, both kids actually, even the youngest who's 1, like, go Cats, go Cats, go Cats, and like they'll start cheering it out loudly. And whenever goals kicked, I pick them both up and we just jump around and they start shouting "Go Cats!" So like I've got them all won over there. I think that
good deal.
That's fine now.
Good deal.
My son's all over. He's got his 5 or 6 players that he knows already at this point. Doesn't know them by their full name, but there's Joel, there's Tomo, being Tom Hawkins, Paddy. He's got a few that he's worked out already, and so if the camera can actually stick around on them long enough, if it's not a free flowing part of the game, or like Paddy was doing an interview since he wasn't playing this past week.
Right.
He was at, Paddy, and like, all right, perfect. Like, you are paying attention, you're on board. We took him to a preseason game this year, but that was the one against Richmond, and it was like 6 quarters long because they gave the VFL team some time. So naturally we couldn't see that one out, not when you've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. But it was great to get him along, and also to go to football again.
Well, that's true. Yeah, they should have maybe taken like 20 minutes in between the quarters, and parents, if you have children under the age of
send them on the field.
7, let them run around the field, get tired out, so they can sleep in your arms for the next couple of quarters.
I mean,
that would have been
like even the fact that we can post game in this in the pre-COVID era, and even now afterwards, after the core of all the lockdowns and stuff, the fact that people can get on the ground after the siren sounds is fantastic.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're doing it at the moment. I don't know if that's one of the little.
I haven't
exceptions.
seen a lot of that yet. I still see I've seen the players going to the stands now to interact with the fans, but I haven't seen fans other than in Sydney a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
Haven't, which that's I don't think you were going to stem that tide in any way, shape, or form.
No, that was impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's the like the siren to go, players already down in the race, and then there'd be another siren a few minutes later, and that was basically the cue that you can go on the ground, have a kick now, and people would just go piling out there. I think some grounds like the MCG, they're a bit too protective of their turf, but somewhere like Geelong, I think it's open slather these days. Well, at least it was before the lockdown, so hopefully it's back to that sometime soon.
Well, I mean, they play so many games at the MCG too, so they might have to be a little bit more restrictive as far as that goes.
Because it may not be the state it needs to be for the game that's tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Which I've spent the better part of the last couple of months lamenting the Cats fixture this year, which hopefully will pay off for them, because yesterday was their 4th home game out of the first 11.
Yeah, it's a little bit back-ended.
Yeah. There's a lot of games in Geelong at the end of the season, which hopefully pays off well for them. Yeah,
certainly to get the decent ladder position. Hopefully a decent ladder position then translates to some success, and transferring it over to the MCG and those sorts of grounds when it really counts, especially when you're going to be likely playing against a team like Melbourne, potentially even Carlton. Obviously, things didn't go too well for them as of when we record their most recent game, but they're teams that obviously play their home deck fairly well. So
I'm looking at it. I think they still have the Eagles twice, I believe, and
North Melbourne again.
North Melbourne once. Yeah, so that does that.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely.
We don't want to get too carried away with ourselves, but hopefully you can bank a few wins from that, and a healthy percentage boost too.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, that's a good thing, because I think we're 10 percentage points up on St Kilda right now, I believe.
Yeah, despite the fact that they've got the extra win, I think. No, do they have the extra? I've lost. Yeah,
I'll have to check the ladder. I'm not sure where they're at right now. Yeah, I don't have that up on my other screen.
No, that's fine. So, as of the time of this show, more than 210 episodes recorded. What's it been like as you continue to build this out, and obviously you're getting varying guests coming in? You've got episodes where you're just talking about, it's either a preview or kind of a review of the round that's just played out. What's it like being in that loop and kind of creating content around the Geelong Footy Club and the broader competition?
it has become my, I'm somebody that is not somebody who tends to go out and about. I'm much more of a homebody once I'm my school day is done. Uh, I wouldn't say that I'm antisocial, but I like maintaining the distance that
Yeah.
I have through this. I mean, I talk to more, hands down, I talk to more people in Australia than I do on my own street, and I've lived on this street for more than a quarter century, and I talk to more people in Australia. I mean,
It's time to just move over. Join us.
well, that I can't get my wife to watch a game. That's not going to be happening.
That's fair.
But yeah, um, hoping to get over there for a visit in the near future. But I it's absolutely it is. This has become it's because I'm a one man show. I mean, I'm doing it on very much a shoestring budget. Um, is it the perfect show? No. Is it the best that I can do? I think it is, and I try to be entertaining. I try to be inquisitive with it. I don't. I'm not somebody who's out here bomb throwing that's saying that your club sucks or this club.
So you're not Kane Corns, is what you're trying to say.
Right. That I guess that's yeah.
Antagonizing everyone with his
no, I don't
clickbaity comments.
because I don't want since I am talking about in some fashion or other, I'm trying to talk about all 18 clubs.
Yeah.
I don't want to alienate any club's fan base. So,
No, that's fair enough too.
Even the Eagles are the Eagles are scuffling right now. I try to find the positives, and I try to and in fact when we wrap up, I'm going to be sitting down to get on the discussion boards at the different clubs just to get the feedback from supporters in terms of what they saw from their club this week, which I've started to implement that into the show, and I think that's been a nice addition to that. But I'm kind of inquisitive about the game, but it's been I truly enjoy watching it, and it has been something that I've enjoyed learning about the history of the game as well. And I've talked to a number of former players. When I not long after I started out, I reached out. I was about 20 episodes in, and I reached out to Ricky Nixon, and I had seen lots of interviews,
the good, the bad.
About the ones I'd seen have been pretty much only the bad, and I because he was somewhat reluctant to want to come on, and he said I can give you half an hour, and it was kind of similar to what we're doing except opposite, because it was about 7:00 in the morning his time, when we spoke. But I told myself, I had about 2 weeks before we were going to do it. I said, I've seen all this other stuff, and if I've seen it, and I've only been following the game for a little while, I know everybody else has. I'm not even going to touch on the other things that everybody knows about. So, I mean, I went and did as much of a deep dive as I could about him.
What hasn't been said about it already?
That he was a school teacher at one time. We talked about stories, when he was a teacher. The business that he runs right now. That his role as as an agent in terms of how you kind of revolutionized income for players and such. And we finished. And he told me, he said, I appreciate that. He said, I've never had anybody ask me those types of questions before. And
awesome.
and I still will send him a note on Instagram every once in a while, and I'll get a response from him. He's a little frustrated with the way the game is going right now as well.
Yeah.
But I don't overstay my welcome in terms of I'm not sending messages every other day or anything. But I know that if I send one, every couple of months, I might hear something back from him, and maybe sometime down the road I can say, hey,
that's a nice feeling.
Could you put in a word with such and such about maybe coming on the podcast?
It's about building this cadence and this positive relationship and being known for being respectful to your guest and what they do and don't want to cover what's going to potentially cause them stress and those sort of things. And I guess like we were talking about this before the recording itself, about the fact that like I was applying this same sort of interview skill set in another podcast space beforehand, all about video games, and I have game developers come on, and it's a very similar format in a sense where we're talking about their careers and the various milestones along the way, and you do come across people who've there's been something not so positive that's been in the news, or we know that they're a controversial figure for whatever reason. And I mean, they've done you the great, especially, and you mentioned before, like it's a shoestring thing. Like that's exactly the same as what it is for me. Like for most part, we're doing this based on the goodwill of others and the fact that people are willing to lend us their time. So let's at least show respect for that, if nothing else, and not put them in a compromising position.
No, that's a great point, and I think that's that's it's a great way to go about doing this, because you want to have and I think this is the same way that you probably take the approach with your show, and from what I've gathered here today, that's definitely the case. You want to have it be an opportunity for that person to tell their story. I'll have things that I want to try to cover. And what I've done is that when I sit down to talk with somebody, I will set up a Google Doc that I share with them, and I'll say, what are things that you want to make sure that we are able to talk about.
Yeah.
And then I'll go and I'll build off of that, so they can add input on there. And it's and I've done that with people who are just supporters of clubs that have had great stories to tell. I mean, because I love telling those kinds of things, because it's a shared, in many cases, kind of a similar shared life experience that probably other people have had, where they can say, well, I had something like that happen as well. I mean, it was a great story with a D's supporter who had a family friend who had been renting not outbuilding from them, that had lived in it, that the parents couldn't take them to footy, so this guy would take them to footy for years, and they lost touch with him, and they won the premiership this past year, and they were able to track him down and take him to the big celebratory event.
Very nice.
At the MCG. And this gentleman's now in his 80s, and they were able to kind of turn the page and turn the cycle around to do that with him, and they were able to reconnect. It was a fun story to hear and to be able to share.
Yeah, I mean, storytelling's, it's a very basic cornerstone of how humanity has kind of evolved over the years anyway, but even when it's kind of confined to this specific space, this area of football, or whether it's video games or whether it's something else entirely, it's fantastic to hear these stories. You can prepare whatever questions you want. I've got notes here for us. I've got some kind of generic ones that I, beats that I try and hit with every episode, or whatever the case happens to be, and that's the same with the other shows that I do as well. But there's things that you just, when you're going down these particular paths, there's the little things, the things that don't get cited in articles online, or aren't part of Wikipedia profiles, or whatever the case happens to be, that you don't know what to expect in that space, and they pop up, and there's some of the, at least speaking from my experiences, they're some of the most enjoyable conversations that I've had across these sorts of shows, and
absolutely,
I love having them, and it's why I love creating the shows that I'm creating. So, and the same applies for this episode here. Some of the little things along the way have just been really fascinating. Even talking about, and because we're kind of almost talking shop here in this sense, where we're kind of exchanging our various experiences conducting similar sorts of interviews. Talking about that story is something that just it's powerful.
Yeah, and it's I'm going to take a moment. I don't like to brag at all. I don't do that, because I don't. But I've been doing all this over the last, since the start of our last school year. Our school year ends in about a week and a half, so I'm done. My school year's done in about a week and a half. But I had a little bit of a health scare back in August of last year at the start of the school year, and I've dropped a little over 42 kilos since the start of the school year as well. So I'm trying to get myself healthier, and
and congratulations on that so far too.
It's been great, because I figured that if I do get to go to Australia, I can actually buy a cheaper airline ticket. It's been one of the reasons why I've been doing that.
Got to get yourself flight ready, right?
Yeah, exactly. That I don't need to fly business class. I can sit in a regular seat now. That would be because I'm not a small person, but I'm a lot smaller than I was. So
that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, but I just this is what I enjoy doing, and I still do the interviews even once the season is over. Because even because those stories are
No,
out
stop.
there afterwards, and I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen once August rolls around and the women's comp starts back up, because from a purely selfish standpoint, I loved having the women's comp where it was, because it was completely separate from the men's comp and
Yeah.
being able to talk about it.
Now we've got that overlap.
Now I'm concerned, how am I going to be able to do it the justice that it deserves when they're kind of overlapping one another. Plus, it's also when I'm going back to school and doing most of my announcing work for the year as well. So I mean, I
And
will
not to
not
mention,
sleep.
even the nature of like the women's game is starting at the point where the men's game gets
It's
at
ending.
its absolute busiest. Like it's
Absolutely.
So it's yeah. I mean, I think that's it'd be interesting even just to hear what the AFL's kind of thinking is around that specific August timeline. Like I can understand that maybe they're trying to ride the coattails of that up to a point, but I think there's pros and cons to that sort of approach, and I'll be interested to see which way things actually play out at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, both seasons could start in March.
Yeah.
And they could run simultaneously, and maybe have the women's games as the curtain raisers. That would, that's in a perfect world though. But do you have to wonder then, just as I'd mentioned, would the women's comp get the coverage that it deserves?
Yeah.
Or would it get lost in the shuffle? I mean, because it was, when it was playing it, again, I know the weather situation was not great playing it in January, February. I completely understand that.
40 degrees Celsius is not ideal.
Yeah, exactly. But they were getting the press coverage that otherwise they may not be able to get once they're overlapping with the men's comp, and I think that's unfortunate. So that's going to be a dance that you and I doing podcasts and other people in the media are going to have to be able to figure out how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Now, as we start to wind things down a little bit, we'll have a little bit of fun with a few things towards the end here. I know you've only been watching the game for about 7 years, but you've consumed a lot.
I have
of the current game, and you've been diving through the archives to learn about what's come before. So, in your eyes, based on your sample size, who's the greatest cat of all time? And it would be a tricky one because obviously there's a lot that you're basing it purely based on old archival footage or whatever the case happens to be.
I would have to say, and I'm going to limit it to the time that I'm excuse me, that I've been watching the game.
That's fair enough.
I'm gonna have to say that it's Joel Selwood. Mainly because of the longevity of his captaincy. You could easily say Tom Hawkins, but the ball is not in his hands as often as it is in Selwood's hands.
He's a finisher at the end of the day.
Yeah, you might be able to reference Paddy Dangerfield, but a good chunk of his career was spent with Adelaide.
Yeah.
I think that if you ask me this in another 5 years,
it'll be very close, of course, right?
Well, I'm thinking maybe it changes to Tom Stewart.
Yep.
I think Harry Taylor was the glue that held the defense together, which they've had to figure out how losing he and Lockie Henderson, I think it was, that have both left in the last couple of years. They've had to figure out how do we replace those guys back there, and now that they've taken Blitzhavs out of defense and have kind of said, okay, we're gonna wink, wink, nudge, nudge, have you be our ruck for a while because we still, I've been following this club for a while. We haven't, and granted, the Segler injury was not real good, in terms of
we drafted the guy to be our ruckman, and he hasn't been able to do that yet.
And this is, and I kind of feel guilty, because I'm not taking a shot at Reece Stanley.
No, actually, he's got some brilliant attributes.
Yeah, I mean, he can outrun a lot. I know Nick Nat Nui is great on the hit outs and such, but Reece Stanley is going to just outrun him all over the grounds all day long.
And he has done that several times.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I'm just when you watch Melbourne play, I'm in awe of. I'm convinced that there's more than one Max gone on the ground. There's got to be 2 or 3 of them because and that's why they're not showing us the entire ground because he's been cloned.
You're right because he bobs up at centre half back to help, free up if there's a forward thrust from the opposition. Yet somehow a moment later he's there clunking a mark in the goal square to win you the game round 23 against the Cats.
Exactly, and that's where Blitz has with his endurance that I think it could be advantageous. I mean we're seeing it happen with Carlton right now, who's lost their ruck.
Yeah,
with Pitnet being out. But I think they've made the decision. You know what? We've lost our ruck, but we're just going to be sticking our nose into every single clearance, and we're still going to get the ball more than you do.
Yeah,
and it's worked out. That's worked out okay for them so far this year. Although not yesterday,
not today, but you'll have those every now and then. And this is that is a specific rivalry too. I think changes the dynamic a little bit.
Exactly. But I think as I was mentioning, I think Tom Stewart. I think just with the way he plays the game, I think that he is probably the next captain.
Yep.
I would say that
next year.
Yeah, and I would say maybe after him, I could honestly see. And again, I don't know. I certainly don't know outside of the game, but from what I see on the ground, I could almost see Brad Close being the one that replaces him. He just seems to be that kind of a, kind of a player that's the glue. I don't know if
like a heart and soul sort.
Yeah, I don't know if Brandon Parfit is a vocal enough player. It's Blitzhavs is already on the north side of 30, so he's not going to be, it's not likely to be him. It's Jeremy Cameron he probably could be, but he's already 27, 28 as well. And again, this is one of the things that I just still find mind-boggling. This is what happens when you get old. When you start talking about people who are in their 30s as being old, that's one of those things that I have a hard time doing. But it's the reality of talking about
within the context of the game. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Gosh, I
say that now. I'm like, Joel Selwood's still got a year on me, and yet I call him an old guy. I'm like, wait, what am I saying about myself?
Exactly. I mean, they're all some of these.
And then I have to proclaim to my students in class, no, hang on, I'm still young. Don't you drop those back in my day sort of comments. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, I've resigned myself to that. That I had an epiphany that and I teach government. I used to teach history. I had an epiphany in my classroom, and you can appreciate this as a teacher. That I was born almost 9 months to the day after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right. Okay.
So I realized in front of my group of students one day that I was one of those, oh, what the hell, the world's going to end anyway, babies.
Yeah. Right.
So, which my mom
from February 1989. No, I'm gonna stop thinking about that.
You're looking at what, June of '88, something like
June
that.
Of '88.
Yeah, something. Yeah. So what was the big news in Australia at that point in time? Yeah. Is that something you can ask your parents about that then? Yeah.
I'll leave that mystery just out there.
Makes sense. Yeah. It
for
does.
Now. And then something will get said just like that, and you go, oh, and the face drops.
Yeah. My mom is not confirmed that. My dad passed away in 2001, but she is not confirmed that that was what happened.
Just a coincidence.
So, yeah, it's just purely coincidental, but it makes for a heck of a story.
Now the next one, and I think you'll have a fantastic sort of. This will be fantastic context for you, considering that for the most, certainly one of these players you would never have seen live, and the other only a very small sample of. Gary Ablett Jr. versus Gary Ablett Sr. Which way do you go? Schoolyard pick where you're just picking who you deem to be the best player available.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't Ablett Sr. start out his career playing in the defense?
A little bit, and he got moved forward, and he also at Hawthorn, I might add too.
Yeah. I think that if I'm looking for somebody to simply store the ball, I would go with senior.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking for somebody who is a facilitator that's going to get the ball into other people's hands, that's going to be involved in score involvements, I would probably go with junior there.
And probably kick a couple himself.
Yeah, that's true. Hitting that first goal he kicked with Gold Coast, when he came back to Geelong, that one that he hit from the pocket was just was wow.
Unbelievable, that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to think who I saw one this weekend that was similar to that. I'm trying to remember who it was that I saw.
Was it the Jeffries guy at the Gold Coast?
I haven't watched the Gold Coast game yet,
so
it wasn't that one yet.
Someone that he kicked a fantastic goal.
I'm not sure who it was.
No, it's escaping me. There's something kind of ticking around in that rat brain there that a pretty fantastic goal in the last couple of days, but it's escaping me as well. But I totally understand that. Yeah, depending on the needs of the team or what you're prioritizing, you could easily justify one or the other.
Right.
We've already touched on Brad Close. He's your favourite kind of up and coming player. There's no space for a Sam DeConning on that sort of level, or Cooper Stevens or someone else in that sort of tier.
Yes, there is, but he just seems to be the he's kind of a role that he's kind of, in many ways, he's kind of become kind of the Tom Atkins in a way. He's kind of the hard nosed, stick your nose in there, don't hesitate getting dirty. In terms of
there's nothing you won't try and do.
Right, exactly.
He doesn't have probably the same build of the Tom Atkins, but
no, he doesn't.
And
it's
shirk a contest.
And I've mentioned this before that it's I think Brian Myers brings a lot to the game, but I just he is so. This is one of the things I loved about seeing Gary Rowan back in last week is that Myers, while he's a great goal sneak, I don't know if physically he is got enough bulk to him to actually bring opposing players to ground.
And I don't know if he's willing either.
Well, that I don't know. I wouldn't want to speculate on that, but yeah, I see your point, but I just don't know if he has the strength to do that. I mean, that's one of the things about
And that wasn't even meant to be a crack at like his psychological sort of thing, but like I don't know if that's what he wants to do, because he might be like his priority personally is that more of that goal sneak sort of role. Like I don't want to get myself involved in the dirt there, because if that ball bobbles out, that's where I can shine.
Right. I mean,
if you look at both, that how much more could that add to your game? I mean, we look at Tom Papley, for example, who throws himself at every contest, and still is this outside wonder who kicks 2 to 3 a game.
Yeah, you look at somebody who was kind of the butt of jokes for several years, in Zach Guthrie, who was a lot of people kind of joke, well, he's here because his brother's here, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
little Hulk.
We can kind of you can kind of mention that it's almost like puberty finally finished for him, and he's finally grown into his position with the club, and is actually been a big contributor this year.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they've stuck with him.
Yeah, I think that confidence is starting to grow in him, and he feels like he belongs. And I think that that's a big thing for any player, regardless of where they've come from, how their body was shaped beforehand. Like if once that confidence starts to build, you have a couple wins.
Right.
That's not just a football thing either. Again, I mean, you've spoken about yourself. We're both teachers. Like you see that kid who has a moment, like that moment of success, whatever it is, and that's that nugget that you can build upon from there on.
Absolutely.
So I think Zach's similar sort of position. The outlook for 2022. Now this is a time capsule, of course. How do you see things shaping up from here? As we record this, I guess for anyone watching or listening in the future, we've just recorded this post the Geelong round 11 win against Adelaide.
Yeah, I think our fixture bodes well for us. We've got a lot of games being played at home. Have some advantageous opponents for at least 3 of those games.
Yep.
Because I think we're sitting at right now. Let me look at here. We are
7-4.
7-4 right now.
Healthy percentage.
Yeah, you figure I'm gonna be so bold as to say that the two games against the Eagles, the game against North Melbourne, that's going to get us to 10 wins right there. And we're going to, do I think we're going to finish top 4? It could happen, but I tipped us to finish 6th this year.
Yeah, okay.
Because I didn't think we were going to be a top 4 side. Now I didn't have Carlton there. I had the Bulldogs. I actually tipped the Bulldogs to win the premiership this year, which they're finally back in the 8 now. Which
they're starting to work their way back.
They get healthy. We've got them coming up this week.
That'll be a very interesting game. I think
it's going to be a big clash with them. So, I do think we finish in the 8. I hope, depending upon, I hope we get a win in the first round and can build upon that. But we haven't always, we've had those top 4 finishes where we've had that double chance, which I don't think we're going to get this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting run home. You're right in the sense that we play West Coast twice, we play North Melbourne a second time.
Right.
We've still we'll play the Bulldogs a second time, I believe. Was it Bulldogs?
I know we have St Kilda.
Yeah, we play the Bulldogs a second
again.
time. We've got them obviously coming up and again in round 20. Now the home games do suit us a little bit. We play Gold Coast again. Again? Have we played them? I've lost track now. Yeah,
no, we haven't played them.
No, we haven't played them.
Yet.
But we don't play them until round 22, the first game
we
play right at the end of the year. So, obviously some of those are to be confirmed time and date. But, I think you're right in terms of I think we're in a good position to lock down the 8 simply based on, for want of a better phrase, some easy kills along the way.
Yeah.
But, top 4... I mean, we're going to have to lift our game a little bit from where it's at. And we know they're capable. Mm-hmm. We know they're perfectly capable. And there's plenty of players, the likes of Sam Menegola and Paddy Dangerfield and the like, that are, even the young guys that seem to be doing wonders, like a Max Holmes, for example, that are there waiting in the wings, ready to step up once their bodies allow it. That could really take us to that top 4, genuinely vying off for the flag position again.
Right.
But it does require a lot to go right.
Yeah.
So I think your assessment of 6th is a fairly reasonable one. We will steal a few games against some of these, whether it's a Carlton or a St Kilda when we play them again or whatever the case happens. I'm not saying them specifically. We also play Port Adelaide again at some point.
Right.
And there's opportunities
the
there.
Tigers coming up yet too.
And yet, so you'll steal a few of those because we know the sort of club that Geelong is. They'll pinch a few of those.
Right.
Even if they didn't deserve it, they'll somehow find a way to win at the last gasp. That's
absolutely
crazily what we do. So, I'd like to think that the 5th, 6th sort of position is a lock is a little bit too much, but is quite feasible. But who knows from there?
Yeah.
Anything's possible once you get to September.
No, I agree with you there completely. Yep.
Well, we'll wrap things up there with that assessment. Make sure viewers/listeners to keep us both accountable. Let us know what you think of our predictions for the Cats for the remainder of the year, and of course make sure to reach out and get in touch with Craig and check out a Yank on the Footy, the podcast. Where should people go if they want to get in touch, or of course check out the show themselves?
Well, you can find it on pretty much any podcast host. But I would suggest heading over to my website, yankonthefooty.com, and you can find there are links that'll take you to all of the different hosts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, a lot of the different ones out there. You can get on the email list, so when a new episode comes out, I'll get that emailed to you within about a minute of when it gets published. But I've had some pretty good traction there, and if you're listening, if you got a great story to tell about the game and you want to hop on there as a guest, there's a guest registration form on there, and I'll definitely reach out to you and try to make a connection to get you on the show.
Please make sure to do so. I hope that people have for anyone who wasn't necessarily familiar before, I hope that having had this conversation that people are quite taken by you and are quite interested to catch your own content. So please go listen to the show, but also if you do have a story to share, as you've just mentioned, make sure to sign up.
I absolutely love talking about the game, and you'll notice through this video why I only do audio.
Well, we've all got faces for radio, don't we?
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, not necessarily. I know I do.
As I mentioned, thanks so much for coming aboard and
You bet,
sharing
Paul. This was great.
the journey so far. And hopefully, I mean, you're relatively a new cat. Hopefully, you'll be seeing premiership success sometime in the near future.
I hope so too. I hope so. It's you know, we're a bit of an aging list, but we're starting to get some of these youngsters in and getting them some experience, and I think the future is probably brighter than maybe some people anticipate.
Absolutely, that next generation's looking pretty great, I think.
Yeah. Yep. You bet.
All right, well, on our show's side, subscribe to the Hoop Show on YouTube if you haven't already. If you just stumbled upon this video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe it. And on podcast feeds, the Behind the Play podcast feed on the exact same services that you've just cited yourself: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and so many others. Please make sure to subscribe to the feed there. Drop a 5-star rating. It always helps with exposure. We'd really appreciate that. Otherwise, again, Craig, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing this journey so far.
Paul. I appreciate it, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. And Cats fans, remain Geelong strong. I'll see you next week.